And let me see what's happening here. I think. All right. Welcome everyone to Hemp Your Health. Happy Tuesday. I'm Christy Thiel, Director of Education at Seed to System and your host. Today's show is our very first on product quality and product safety and how to read a certificate of analysis or COA with a very well qualified, overqualified expert. And his name is Carl Craig. He is PhD and CEO of Botanacor Laboratories. Carl's career has been keenly focused on providing accurate, reliable, and defensible laboratory testing data to assist in decision-making within the environmental, life sciences, drug manufacturing, and clinical industries. He brings an international reputation to his role for creating value at the intersection of science and business operations. Carl received his PhD from Santa Barbara and is his postdoctorate fellowship from Cal Berkeley. Previous to Botanacor, Carl was corporate VP and COO of Microbial Solutions of Charles River Laboratories. He was president of Environmental Resource Associates and founder and GM of Pharmaceutical Resource Associates. He is a science and chemist at heart and to his core, and he brings a remarkable ability to grow businesses across borders and cultures with his leadership as CEO at Botanacor. Carl, welcome.
Hey, how are you? That wasn't a whole lot. Thank you. I hope I deserve all that. Thanks.
You deserve it. And we were just talking a little bit prior to coming live, and your wealth of information is really incredible. Would you share a little bit about even how you got to Botanacor and hemp testing in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Christy said, I love science, and I have a great story that fits into our industry. I couldn't have planned it any better, really. So I did my graduate studies in solar energy research, and interestingly enough, back then, way back then, there weren't the level of discoveries that we needed to make solar work the way it does today. But I went on to postdoc at Berkeley for a guy by the name of Melvin Calvin. For any of you that took high school biology, you might remember that name, and it's part of what is called the Calvin cycle. So Melvin won the Nobel Prize for discovering how photosynthesis works and keeps all the plants that we're talking about alive. What is respiration? How does that work? It's fascinating. But when I went to work for him, he was working on a project that's little known. You won't read about it hardly anywhere. He was working to try and grow high terpene content plants down in South America to use as biofuels for third world nations. The project never really went anywhere, but that was kind of his passion at the end of his career. After discovering photosynthesis, he wanted to put it to work. So that was fun.
Terpenes for biofuel. If you had a career after this, maybe you could save our planet with more of that information and innovation. It'd be fascinating. And we could benefit from it too. So that's so great. Thank you. First of all, what is Botanacor? And your national testing industry, anything that we should know about what you do before we go into what you do?
Sure. I'll give you the real high-level elevator on Botanacor. Botanacor and its sister company Agricor, which is a marijuana testing laboratory. Since we're talking about testing cannabis, they're just in two different regulatory spaces. was started by, and I'm going to say this word carefully because I know people get a little nervous, guys that came out of the pharmaceutical industry, right? That was a big fear in the early days. Oh, big pharma's coming after us. But really, these guys came out of developing methodology for analyzing pharmaceuticals for purity and safety. That was their background for 20 years. And so they really started Botanacor in that very same vein, which is really, if somebody says what differentiates you from everybody else, it's that background in pharmaceutical analysis as opposed to agri-analysis or anything else.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you. And I mean, I feel like every single one of these questions, we could go and have a conversation just on that. And I do want to get into, there's so much confusion around quality and safety and how to determine what is and isn't safe. How do we know what hemp products are safe, and how do we determine quality in finished products?
Yeah, okay, you started with the $94,000 question, thanks. It's a great question. And now I'm going to invoke something else that people probably are a little worried about, but I'm here to petition you on the other side. The way we're going to get there is through regulation. What do I mean by that? I'll give you a great analogy. Everybody in America, for the most part, with the exception of maybe Flint, Michigan, can turn on their tap and drink their water and be assured that it's safe. How do you know that? Well, it took panels of people, experts, and regulators to sit down and talk about how much lead in your water is safe, how much cadmium in your water is safe to drink. Because you know what? It's out there. It's in the environment and we have it. In fact, we have pesticides in our water. We have pharmaceutical products in our water. And the question is, how much is safe? It took years to get there. We need to go through that same transformation in the hemp space. That is, we need to get the experts together. And many of them are starting this now to talk about, well, if you're going to ingest this topically, if you're going to ingest it orally, if you're going to ingest it through your lungs, what are the things we should worry about and at what level?
Yeah.
We're not there yet. We're not there at all. So that's going to be the transformation. And again, I bring up the fact that regulation's involved in this, because what we'd like to do is get away from the fact where every one of you have to be worried about, well, what's good and what's not.
Yeah. So do we err? So does this industry in Botanacor err? Where are we taking our regulations from? Are we erring more on the side of marijuana? Are we erring more on the side of pharmaceuticals, supplements, herbs? Where are those standards beginning?
Well, what I would say is it's a little bit the Wild West today. There's no standardization of what that is. Give you a real example. In Pennsylvania, they're writing their regulations right now to say you have to determine the lowest value you can, and there can't be anything seen there. And that's what they're going to call safe.
Ooh.
All right. Let me tell you how you game that system.
Yeah.
I go in and I set up my laboratory and I say, this is as low as I can go. Now, there's no rules about how you do that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say, this is how low I can go. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but I'm not going to report it because I've now said that's as low as I can go.
So when you
Another
say,
lab may come in.
go ahead,
Another
sorry.
lab may come in and level even higher. And so therefore you can have a lot more contamination in there if that's the way you're going to set the rules. It's not the way to set the rules. You need to come up with numbers. We'll talk about numbers a little bit, but numbers that say below this, we consider it safe. Above this, we don't. And where that's going to come from is leadership within this industry, because it is going to steal a little bit from the nutraceutical industry, a little bit from pharma, a little bit from marijuana to come up with the right answers for this industry. That's the way it's going to be done, I think.
And again, this is why there's so much confusion around testing, reading a COA, where compliance is, where quality is, and we're talking about parts per billion. and determining, and we don't, so just to put this in perspective, you're probably not looking at your water tests. You're probably not looking at your asking for COAs from your greens or your turmeric or your multivitamins. So we're really being, this industry is showing up to be transparent and educate so that everyone can feel safer and assured that they're getting a safe product, because hemp again is a soil remediator, and we don't want, we know that there's toxic stuff, toxic materials in the soil, and we don't want people getting sick, because then we'll get shut down really fast. So Carl, to break this down so that people aren't imagining that they know what we're talking about, let's kind of go from what a COA looks like, what should be on there and what shouldn't be on there, and what a full panel really is.
All right. I think I got that, Christy. You broke up a little bit on my side. I apologize. Let me start with this. Here's something very basic everybody should start with. There are sort of two types of parameters that you're looking for. One is about the quality of the product, but really doesn't have a lot to do with the safety of the product. And the other is about the safety of the product. So for example, when you're looking at cannabinoid content, you want to know how much CBD or CBG or CBDN I have. That's about product quality.
Okay.
When you're testing for pesticides, heavy metals, residual solvents, that's testing for safety. So typically, you're not going to have on the quality side limits or things to look at, right? Somebody's going to say, I have a 22% flower or CBD, and everybody gets excited. But there's not a safety implication there. Whereas all of these other safety regulations need a number to look at. So, for example, I'll steal a little bit from marijuana, because they've gone through and they've said these are the limits. Now with heavy metals, you either pass or you fail. That's it. You either have too much or you have less than that, and that's okay. In hemp, if you see anything, the question is, what does that mean? The lab reported I saw some heavy metal. Well, in marijuana, that may be 10 times lower than they would be worried about. But now in hemp, because we don't have any regulations, I'm not sure what that means. So let me work down. Actually, can I use this to leverage into how to look at a certificate for this information?
100%.
Perfect. So one of the things that we see in this industry, because it is new, because people are really trying to make their place in it, is certificates. I won't say often, but they do get adulterated. So the very first word I have for you out there is, because we are early in this industry, because the regulations aren't set and every one of you has to look at certificates and understand them, the very first thing you need to do is figure out, is it authentic? Is it not? Every lab has the ability to authenticate that. It's very, very important that you do that, right? We get calls every day. Does this match? And all we do is compare the two and say, you know what? It's been altered.
Explain what
it might have been altered.
What are they altering?
What's that, Christy?
What are they altering? Potency or safety?
So great question. I'm going to start with the innocuous all the way to the sort of less innocuous. Some people want to brand the certificate and they pull it into Photoshop and they change things around because they want to brand it. All right. Now, they may not have changed any of the numbers, but here's the impact. When somebody calls us and says, is that your certificate? We say no. Now, because the person calling didn't pay for the data, they're just looking at the cert. I can't tell them what's been changed. I just tell them it's adulterated.
Okay.
So even though it seems innocuous, it's just, I want my brand on there so my customers see it. That is now an adulterated C of A, and the customer doesn't have any idea what's been adulterated. That's kind of on the innocuous side. However, we have people who fabricate numbers. Yes, they change cannabinoid content. The other things they'll do, this is real common, is they get a really good result on a certificate, and then they just keep using that certificate with another name. This is my cherry wine. This is my purple kush, and they continue to use it. So everything on the certificate has to match the original one, including the name of the product, the batch of the product, where it was taken in from, the customer. All of that information is important to verify. So what goes on a certificate? Clearly the name of the requester. So who sent us the test? That should be on there, and you should be able to see who that was. They will then oftentimes identify this was from batch number 6 or field number 4, whatever that is. Great. Now you know what this is related to. The other part is, what tests did we do? And what was the compound submitted? So for example, if you're expecting results on flour, it should say on there, we tested flour, not a concentrate, not something else. We've seen people do that. They'll slip concentrate results in and go, ooh, look at my flour, it's amazing.
Wow.
So you want to be able to see that. Then the rest of it is numbers, right? You're looking at what is the concentration of, in this case, potency, the cannabinoids that are in there. Those are usually listed. And sometimes the labs will put total cannabinoid content in there and a number of other things to try and make it easier to understand. So again, make sure it's a valid cert, and then it's got all the kind of proper bits so that you can identify this is the product I'm thinking it is. I can trace it all the way back to the batch you say it is, and then the results are what I expect.
This is so important to make the distinction between quality and safety. Quality is more about potency. If you're expecting 300 milligrams and it says 200, then that's good to know, and vice versa. If it's over what you're expecting. And then safety, I think, is really a big issue too. And that's where you're verifying microbials, heavy metals, pesticides, etc. Now, we didn't talk about this, but how important do you think it is that we eventually start testing for glyphosate, especially with outdoor hemp?
I'm going to have to guess at that, Christy. I'm sorry. You broke up again. Can you?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I am so sorry. So how important, or do you think it's important that the hemp industry eventually start testing, especially outdoor grows, test for glyphosate?
Yeah, so I'm going to step back and say that I'm going to maybe correct something I said. So potency, yes, is quality, but there's also a bit of a safety piece of that too. And that is that you want the same dosage every single time. And I would put that homogeneity or dosage into the safety category, right? How much is there total is what I would call. But then making sure that if, for example, it's an edible, a smokable, and ingestible, it's always going to be about the same, right? Consistency. And I consider that more of a safety parameter. Going to what things should we be looking for, I think that will develop over a long period of time. If you look, for example, in the agribusiness around coffee and peanuts and legumes, they test very carefully for mycotoxins because it is a product that is grown in wet, warm environments where you can get a lot of mold and aspergillus growth, which then generates mycotoxins, which are very, very unhealthy for us. So I can see that as a direction that we'll see more of. I do think that there will be a lot of quality indicator stuff, like what's in my soil that helps me to grow a better plant. Not so much what contaminates it, but what's there so that I know I can get a reproducible product every time. So I think that the testing industry will certainly grow along with this industry to provide things that help the farmers, the producers, the extractors, and so forth.
Thank you. It must be fascinating to be on your side where, like, as we're all kind of learning this together, you're on the front lines and influencing what safety is. Especially, I love that you have that history with microbial testing, and especially if someone's going to be taking this as a medicine and getting off pharmaceuticals, let's say, for example, we don't want them to have downstream side effects from anything. And that's one of my main concerns about people, especially with the alteration of COAs, that people who are doing that are really contributing to a really poor reputation in the hemp industry, because we want to promote safety and they're just promoting quick profit, which doesn't benefit anyone, especially if they're already have underlying conditions. And those heavy metals or microbials add up quickly if they're concentrated, especially if they're taking high doses of hemp every day. So, and I heard once,
Yes, some of the
go ahead.
no. I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. It brings up another important thought process. Now, as a scientist, I think about this. I'm not sure everybody does. But if I'm taking a concentrate, a tincture, okay, it's a quick way to get the medicine I want, or the cannabinoid I want. But when you concentrate the plant down to get that concentrate that you take, you've concentrated everything down. So pesticides, metals, all that sort of stuff. And that's where I think we really have to focus on making sure we have good requirements that everybody is looking at. Sorry, I just wanted
Oh,
to
I
agree
could
with you.
I couldn't agree more, especially because a lot of people are using hemp as a preventative, especially neurological, and we don't want these heavy metals getting through the blood-brain barrier and making things worse or complicating symptoms, because then we're going to have a whole nother fight to fight. Um,
Yeah, true.
So on what's happening, I'm just like I want to just like go. I want to solve all of hemp's problems right now with you, from farming to fiber to, I mean, there's so many things that this hemp industry is going to, and are there going to be different testing standards for supplements versus fiber versus animal feed? There's so many industries that hemp can be, part of. And will, I guess this is now a question instead of a thought. Will Botanacor have different testing standards depending on whether it's being used for a supplement, a food, animal feed, fiber, etc.?
Right. So the answer is currently no. In other words, we just try and do our best analysis, whether it is a protein powder from a drink or whether it is a pair of socks. And believe me, we get everything in between. But because there's no, yeah, I know. How do you set regulations on how much CBD or pesticides are in your socks? Like, I don't know where we begin with that. But, but I think it will go that way. And we're excited to see it go that way. So if you think about it, an inhalation route, and especially a vaporized inhalation route, is something where you got to be very, very careful. And I think you'll see regulations come out around that are very, very specific to what can harm us, and especially at those levels. But that would probably be very different than maybe what's in a drink. If you're going to drink it through your system, there may be other things that your body can tolerate that we wouldn't if you ingest it into your lungs. So we're going to see over the next 10 years, and it'll take that long, the development of exactly what you're talking about, standards for hemp. If it's going to be just used as fibrous material, what are we worried about? You're not going to eat it, so you're not worried about the same things. So I think we'll see that start to develop, and people are beginning to work on that now. It's a Herculean task. In the environmental industry, it took 20 years to get there.
Wow.
How much mercury can you have in the environment? How much pesticide in the streams? That took a long time. And so we're kind of on that same path now.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy, especially with more pollution. I think this is a big deal. And especially in Colorado, we had so many fires this year. And even the smoke and the pollution that came in from California and Oregon, I'm assuming it's going to even affect our crops this year. And so testing is going to be, in my opinion, really critical so that we're not getting the arsenic and asbestos and things that could be accumulating from the ash from fires all over the West Coast. This really changes the environment and what the plant could potentially be remediating. Do you think
Yeah,
you're, what, go ahead. Yes.
go ahead.
What do
You
you
go.
think you're going to start seeing more or less of in the safety side of testing from the fires? Or anything we should be looking out for?
You know, I've got to be honest. I don't know that anybody is really concerned is the wrong word, but I don't know that anybody is really digging into that right now. Because what you're really talking about is sort of interhemispherical mixing of stuff. What they're worried about is what's in it, period. I don't care how it got there. I don't care if it came from somewhere else. What is in that plant? So I don't think they're looking at the causal piece of this. I think they're looking at what's interesting to look at. Heavy metals, obviously, pesticides, microbiology are the big ones. In concentrates, have you got other residual solvents that you're bringing in that could be dangerous? But the other one, the last one, and you saw this in the vape crisis, right, is what else could be contributing, and it's not even from the plant. So now we've got to be really careful that, you know, the whole stream has been tested to make sure that the plant is not the issue. Yeah, we figured that out, but maybe it's the vaporizer itself. Maybe it's the way that was prepared. So all of that is going to develop over time. And it's important for people that are developing, you know, final use products like that, end use products, that they understand that as well, right? That the quality of what they're putting in is one piece, but they need to look at the quality of the whole thing.
That's a really good point, because you look at the concentrate when you get your crude oil back from the extractor, but then you need to also test the finished product so that the consumer knows, okay, the concentrate, the oil itself is okay, but what about the carrier oils? What about the inactive ingredients? That I've never even thought about that. Maybe that is the source of contaminants. And this is so much about education and just teaching people safety, 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 quality. Don't buy, you know, your hemp at a gas station, especially if you don't know what's in it. I'm sure there's some good brands out there in the gas stations, but in general, I'm making a vast, comparison there. So yes,
Bringing this full circle, whether you buy it at the gas station or even at a reputable shop, right? One of the things that as consumers or as producers, even right now, we're forced to be able to look at the quality of that and try and make some decisions, and that's pretty hard. Right?
yeah.
So when we talked about it, I mean, where else do consumers say when you buy something, can I see the certificate of analysis on that and see what was in it? Like that doesn't really occur because the regulatory body is sort of taking care of that. Until then, we're going to have to be those police and try and understand whether or not that product meets the quality standards that I want.
I love that. And that's another reason, everyone that's listening, it's really important to use reputable labs. We haven't even got into maybe the corners that some less reputable labs are taking. But I'm sure there are some out there. Are there?
That's a whole other segment we could talk about. No, but if you don't mind, let me give you one example. And, you know, I don't know if it's that they're not reputable, but everybody wants to try and do the best they can for their customer. So there are ways to, for example, make your product look better. I can do things in the lab that will make your product look better. And when I do, you're happy with me because, gosh, I can go sell that product for more money. Well, that's kind of a short-lived thing. There was a local lab in Colorado that recently got in trouble for using science to boost the levels of cannabinoids in the product. I understand scientifically, I understand how they did it. It makes perfect sense. They cut some corners, made that go, and the user was happy. They're like, I've got more cannabinoid than if I send this to a lab down the street. At the end of the day, when they get caught, now everything comes back to normal. So I think that for us, you know, we want to make sure that the industry is policed. The industry, I mean, the testing industry is having to meet certain standards to make sure that we are not doing that for our customers or to our customers.
Do you think that this industry, as far as testing and safety goes, is going to be regulated state by state? So Colorado is going to have different standards than Kansas or Michigan or California, or are we going to be able to get to a place where federally we have an accepted level of safety on the microbial, heavy metals, pesticides, etc.?
So that's a great question. And I'm going to say that all of this gray hair is going to allow me to say that I've seen a couple of industries go through this, and here's what I see for us right now. This is total prognostication, and it may mean absolutely nothing. But because there's not a federal lead in this, the only thing the feds have looked at is in the plant below 0.3, we're going to call it hemp. That's their only requirement right now. So what's happening is all the states are stepping in to set up their own requirements, and they're doing it quickly because they want to know that they're providing safe product for their state. It's going to get well out in front of the feds, and then it's hard to pull that horse back in the barn because all the states are going to say, look, we got a program and here's what it looks like. This happened in the environmental industry as well. That's why I say I can speak to this, because it happened. New Jersey set their own criteria. California, you know, when you buy a car in California, its air emissions requirements are different than any other car in any other state. So I think what's going to happen, and this is an unfortunate thing, is that the states, for good reason, are running ahead, setting their requirements, and then it's going to be hard to get all 50 of them to agree to the same thing at a federal level. So if I had to bet, I'd put my money on it's going to be state by state, which makes it far more difficult for everybody. But
well, yeah, because your Botanacor is a national testing lab. So someone from Nevada and Oregon and Pennsylvania can send their hemp to Botanacor, but if they're looking for specific state regulations and standards, and you're testing at Colorado standards, it's again a whole nother confusing conversation about is it higher or lower quality end product. I personally agree with you. It would be great if we could just come to a federal, national agreement about what's in the best interest of the end consumer for the health.
And I think, you know, and we'll continue to push. I think people will continue to push because if you do that, now the product can move across state lines and you know it's the same product or similar product, right?
Yes.
Whereas if California's requirements are much more stringent than Montana's, then you know, now I want to buy product from California and not Montana. So if we've got one federal sort of safety requirement, I'll come back to my example, like drinking water. It's the same in every state. They've got to meet the same requirements in order to push it out as safe drinking water. That's nirvana if we can get there.
I totally believe we can. I agree. It might take 10 years, but there's so many people that are invested in this. And we'll wrap this up in a second. Sarah Wells has a question. Thank you, Sarah. She asks, how else can we self-police as an industry so consumers don't have to be worried? Is there anything that we can be doing so seed system, for example, we grow, we extract, we have finished products. What do you think consumers are looking for when we say we're a transparent company? What should that mean to the consumer? And what do you think from your expertise as a product manufacturer, we should explain to our consumers, what does that mean, transparency for safety?
I would say for today, right? And there are a number of things, but my number one would be, it's okay to adopt what other industries have already done. We don't necessarily have to make it up, right? So for example, if I were to look at the contaminant levels, appropriate contaminant levels for pesticides, and I looked at California and Oregon and Washington and Colorado, And I said, okay, this is what the regulators have said is safe. I'm going to go there too. I'm going to go there ahead of having a regulation. And I'm going to say, I've met the California standard for marijuana with my hemp. And I know that at least some smart people have looked at that information, right? The same would be true of heavy metals, right? Without any kind of guidance. So what I would say we can do is sort of pull together the best of the best. I mean, it's all cannabis, right? So marijuana is just a little ahead of us in terms of setting some of these levels. Let's steal from it and say,
Yeah.
they said this was safe. I think that's a pretty decent place to start.
I love this. And I want people to understand too, CETA system really does want to educate you. And that's why Carl is on here today, so that we're not educating you on our products, but other products that you may be looking at for your friends and family, to do your own due diligence, ask for the COAs, verify that Botanacor or another lab really did it and it wasn't altered, and to look better or somehow become fabricated. Because I heard, this was at a trade show way back when, from another testing facility, that up to 80% of COAs are altered.
I don't know, because we don't see all of that. The only time we know is when somebody calls to check. I will tell you it's far too often. I don't know if it's 80%, but it is far too often. And unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people out there in this industry that want to take advantage. So yes, they do. It does happen.
So this is another reason, to everyone who's listening, quality matters. Quality over price in some instances, because you get what you pay for, and testing does cost money. And people who cut corners on testing are not doing you any favors, especially downstream if you're getting contaminated with some of the stuff that could potentially be in these finished products. Carl, this has been great. And I feel like I'm going to have to listen to this again and again, just to kind of be like, all right, we are making leaps and bounds. Botanacor is making leaps and bounds and creating more safety and security in the finished products, standards, etc., so that we can come to a federal area like water and herbs and supplements of what is safe. But so far, you've set the standards. You have incredible quality and assurance in your testing. Any leading or closing thoughts on things the consumer should be looking for, not concerned about, or where you see this industry leading? Anything you want to share with us?
Well, first, I will say thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. As you can tell, I'm passionate about it. I really, really love that we're part of an industry where we are trying to do good, right? And I mean, I can say to my employees every day, we are trying to make a difference in the health and safety of people through what we do. So that is awesome. I guess my sort of closing comment would be, don't be afraid of the movement toward more regulation, more guidance, all of that stuff. I know it seems scary, but at the end of the day, it's only going to make our lives better once we get there. And then to participate in that. Talk to people about it, understand what it means, understand why you're going in that direction, be an informed person, be participating in it. I think it'll be an exciting, I say 10 years, maybe it'll be less, but.
Oh, I hope so. And I can't imagine how many times your testing facility has to pivot when there's isolate, broad spectrum, water soluble, all these different nanotechnologies and all the different extractions. So thank you for providing a service out there that all of us can trust, is at its highest standards, doesn't compromise, and is invested in moving forward so that we can get to this quality assurance as quickly as possible. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, and here's what I'm going to say, because you got to invite me back, because we need to talk about what, and I'm sure there are people out there that are kind of seeing this and struggling with it. what is measurement uncertainty and how does that impact me? And what do we do about that? So that's kind of a whole other thing, because it really is. I mean, when the USDA put that in the regs, it kind of flowed to everybody. And I will say that even as a scientist, it's a pretty difficult concept. So maybe if we break it down and make it fun, we can let people understand what that is.
I definitely want to do that. And we're going to talk about that today, but I just kind of got off on some tangents. But yes, there are future conversations here with Carl. Thank you, Carl. And we have more to share about exactly what he said. These measure, how, what is a measurement? Where are we getting these numbers from? And where is that sort of at 6.5 and 7.2? Like, how do we come up with specific numbers? All right. So to the first conversation with Carl and creating an understanding around safety, assurance, quality, transparency, and the leaders in the testing and laboratory space. Carl, thank you for being here with us. How do people, if people have questions, how do they get a hold of you, and what's the best way to follow up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a LinkedIn site, Botanacor Labs. Our URL is botanacor.com. So you can go there, you'll get all the contact information you need. You can get a hold of me. If you send a note and say, I need to talk to Carl, it'll get to me, I promise.
And your site is really great. So you explain exactly what is on that COA and how to read it. So please look at their website, botanacor.com. It will go into more detail. You can contact Carl, you can contact myself. We're here for your health. We're here for your safety. We're here for your education. Thank you for making time with us on Hemp Your Health. Enjoy. Mwah. Thank you, Carl. We'll see you soon. Enjoy, everyone. And do remember to hemp your health. Bye for now.